Hey, audio enthusiasts, I think you're in the market for a compact power amplifier, or why would you be here? Maybe you're here for my wise words of wisdom, or maybe you're a fan of the Audio Phil show. Oh, he isn't here today, but Betty and Debbie are. Watch through to the end. Or maybe you're here for what some of my commenters say are my staggeringly poor attempts at humour. Or maybe, no, this can't be right, never do I stoop to that lowest form of wit which we all know to be bone-dry sarcasm. No, you're here for the amp. Let's unbox it. My first remark about this amp would be that it is pretty much unremarkable. Unremarkable in that it doesn't have any show-off features, no bells, whistles, razzmatazz, and that's a good thing. Did you want to get bells when you just wanted an amp? So, let's say that you're setting up a smallish system with smallish speakers in a smallish room. You'll need a smallish amp, and this could be it. To pull out a spec from the manual, you'll get 70 watts per channel into 4 ohms. If you factor in the usual optimistic measurement practices of amp manufacturers these days, you probably won't imagine using it to drive your immense, state-of-the-art home cinema system. Well, you probably could get away with it, but I like to keep things in proportion. It's a small amp for a small system. Like my Yamaha NS10M monitors in my grey room studio, where I make these videos. Or my vintage B&W DM100s in my alcove studio, where I make all of my irritating unboxing music. Album out later this year. Yes, I've tried this amp. It works fine, no problems. That, dear friends, is probably as subjective as I'm going to get.
Wait a minute. Aren't you going to say stuff like it can't get that caramel sound? There's a lack of digital glare. The soundstage is 2.5 to 3 feet in depth. Like some of the other reviewers?
No, thank you, Betty, who, by the way, is paraphrasing actual review comments. I'll go so far as to say that I don't hear any noise, distortion, frequency response, or any other woo-woo problems. Hey, I'm not the only reviewer around here, and you should take in a range of opinions. Did I ever tell you that I don't know everything? One thing I don't know is how people generally use amps like this. I mean in the sense of sound sources. The S.M.S.L A200 has a range of input options, which are analog RCA, coaxial RCA, optical, USB-C, HDMI and Bluetooth. Do users have multiple sources and switch between them, or do they have one source and it's great that the amp includes an input for that? Tell me in the comments. Now, if I'm going to use this as my studio amp, and there's no reason why I shouldn't, because these days I only use small near-field monitors, then I'd probably use the RCA analog inputs driven from my audio interface. At the cost of a bit more fiddle factor, I could use my audio interface for input to my computer and recording software, and the A200 for the output via USB-C. But either way, I wouldn't be chopping and changing. And if I did want to use the A200 for my modest home cinema, well, my TV handles source switching. Oh, by the way, there are probably hordes of home cinema enthusiasts who are leaping with delight that there's an HDMI input, with ARC apparently, whatever that is. My vintage Pioneer Curo TV doesn't have it. P.S. I know what it is. That's my staggeringly poor attempt at humour. Yes, I know, I kind of contradicted myself along the way from where I started to where we are now. Let's say that this amp is good for a small home cinema, but maybe not really appropriate for an enormous one. There, I fixed it. While I'm round the back of the amp, let me say that I'm happy with the binding posts that you can also use with banana plugs. And I'm very happy that the power supply is internal, no brick. It works from 100 volts to 240 volts, so the whole world is happy. Maybe audiophiles are not so happy that they can't upgrade the PSU, but living in a world with so many bricks and wall warts, I love internal. OK, I'm round the front now. What's the first thing you notice? 2 VU meters, yay! Now, I'll be the first to say that they don't really do anything useful, but they do at least show signal present and they dance happily up and down while the music plays. They're driven by the input signal, by the way, so they read the same whatever the output volume. One curiosity that I'd like to ignore but I have to mention is that with no signal present, they read -60, not -infinity. So they are already a short way up the scale. In the normal world, my first suspicion would be noise or an earth loop, but it's the same on all inputs and I can't track it down to anything, so I'll have to put it down to an anomaly, perhaps this individual unit. Another curiosity is that it has been said elsewhere that the scale calibrated from -infinity to +3 VU isn't appropriate for metering a power amp. Well, I'd say it possibly is. If 0 VU represents the clipping point of the amp, then it means something. Or maybe +3 to allow a bit of headroom. I haven't tested it because I still have bad dreams about burning my finger on a dummy load resistor. So I'll just leave that as something to think about, or more probably to ignore completely. Take your pick. Over on the right we have a knob, a multifunction knob, and yay again, it isn't the on-off switch. That's on the back. It works as the input selector, volume control, and you can also access preset EQs and treble and bass controls. That's multifunction. Come on, I can't possibly say it isn't a little bit fiddly, but I doubt if I could put all of that into one knob and make it any easier. I'll just throw in here that there's a remote control where you can access all of these functions as well. Now, here's something good, as if we haven't had enough goodies already. The volume control is digital. Did you get that? The volume control is digital. OK, I can see I'm going to have to explain. One issue, and it is an issue with analog volume controls, is that at low volumes they tend not to track very well between the channels. And even at any volume, there's always a niggling doubt that the channels are not precisely the same level, which of course they should be. I get this issue both in my listening pleasure or displeasure and production. In fact, for production, my previous power amplifier had a little too much gain, so I had to have the output control on my audio interface very low down. And there were most definitely tracking issues, which I solved by putting a pair of 20 dB attenuators before the amp's inputs. But with a digital volume control, no problem. I'm going to wind this down now with a few points for commenters who didn't get this far in the video. See what I'm doing here? OK, 1. I said that the power switch is on the back, but you can also turn the power on and off by long pressing the multifunction control. Eh, what? If there's a proper power switch, I think we all ought to be using it, don't you think? 2. I mentioned the power output specs of this amp earlier, and that amps are often measured in ways that could possibly be described as flattering. 70 watts per channel into 4 ohms is the spec. Well, if I look deeply into the manual, I can see that the power consumption of this amp is 36 watts. And that's not the standby consumption, which is specified separately. 36 watts to me means that this amp cannot produce more than 18 watts per channel average power, even if the efficiency were 100%. As I said, I didn't measure it, but I include this as an interesting curiosity for interested audio enthusiasts. Last, the subwoofer output that can deliver 100 watts into 2 ohms. There isn't one. It's a misprint in the spec. Maybe you could bridge the amp and get a decent amount of power from it, if not the full 100 watts average. Maybe, with more relevance, you were expecting an RCA line out for a sub. There isn't one. Well, this has been fun, hasn't it? It's not the most amount of fun I've ever had, but as I said, it's a no bells and whistles amp. It has all the inputs you could probably need. It has decent power output for its size and cost. The front panel control and displays are fine. Will I use it myself? Yes, I'm going to put it in my boudoir system for a while, driving my vintage Sonab OA5s. See how it gets on. One more thing. S.M.S.L's publicity material makes a big thing of the silicon carbide amp chips. Illegitime non carborundum. What do you say about my humour now? See you soon.
Hi, Debbie. I've heard that he's going to release a whole album of his irritating unboxing music on Spotify, other streaming services, and Bandcamp.
Yes, Betty. He says it's going to be very good.
Very good? Very good for stress testing your ears.
Ha 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 ha.